I'm Steve with Data Lab, and today I have the pleasure of talking with some experts up here who I'll introduce in a minute about the impact that voice assistants will have in the enterprise. But before I jump into that and introduce the panel here, I wanted to just get a show of hands. How many of you right now are leveraging voice assistants in your organizations today? Show of hands. Anybody using Alexa, Google Assistant, Cortana, anything? One? Okay. Two? How many? Three. If I keep going, I'll get a few more, I think. How many of you are users of one of these devices at home? Okay. Yeah, so over the last few years, the voice assistants have, I think the number is like 50 million households now, so some crazy number. And the result of that is we're all imagining all of the things that voice assistants can do for us in our personal lives and starting to imagine some of the things that these digital assistants can do for us at work also. And that's the topic for today. We're going to talk about what these digital assistants are doing for us or potentially can do for us in the enterprise today and maybe what the future looks like. And so let me introduce the panel and then we'll jump in. And I'm going to be going from, let's see, your right to left. Is that right? Yeah? Okay. So Omar Tawakol is the founder and CEO of Voicera, the creator of Eva, which is an AI virtual assistant that makes business meetings more productive. And continuing right, Barg Upender is the founder of CoGlide, an AI-powered lead generation and sales management platform. And Gaurav Kuchhal is the Chief Product Officer at Alan, and Alan's a platform for voice-enabling existing mobile and web apps. And then to his right, Vineet Sinha is the Strategic Head at Salesforce.com and is the lead architect for Violet Conversation, which is an open source project for building sophisticated conversational apps and bots. It's a framework. And to his right, we've got Rachel Bitish, and she is the co-founder and chief revenue officer at Conversation One, which is a build once, deploy anywhere platform for conversational applications. Did I get that right, Rachel? All right. And then on the end, we've got Sean Gonzalez, and Sean is the founder and principal at General Influence, a data science consulting and recruiting firm that helps organizations capture and leverage institutional knowledge using machine learning and data visualization. All right. And we're going to start with some 30,000-foot questions. We're going to bring it down as we go. And we've got a small enough group here where if somebody has a thought, a comment, jump in. Raise your hand if you've got a question, and we'll pull that into the conversation. Fair enough? All right, awesome. So I'm gonna start with a question that's open to any one of you. And the first question is, how important is it, in your opinions right now, for enterprises to be considering voice and virtual assistants? Is this something they need to do, nice to do? What are your thoughts on it? Anybody want to take that? Omar? Yeah.
Yeah, I would flip it and say that they aren't really thinking about whether they have to use voice directly. They start with some sort of business problem that voice is the natural solution for. So for example, if you're talking about, meetings, that's something people do. How do they become more productive? Or if you have a call center, what do you do? So I think it's more important they start with that. Otherwise, they're approaching it from a perspective of like, hey, this is a really hot trend. But when you instead approach it as this is a really, really important way to solve an important business problem, that's what I think is driving the bigger adoption. Like the sizzle and sex appeal will help a little bit, but the fact that this is the only way to really solve these business problems is what's driving, I think, the adoption.
Yeah, so start with a problem. Anybody else want to comment on this?
Yeah, I can add to that. I think, a lot of the voice assistants have done a very good job in educating the consumers, what voice can do. And I think all of us here firmly believe that this is the most natural interface, and this is probably also the fastest interface to get information. So I think the challenge for enterprise is they need to have something for the consumers and for their employees, but for their mission critical business tasks. I don't think voice is only good for find a song or turn on the lights, But if you think about, some field service scenarios, some of the pilots, we are working with, or take an example of a food delivery guy, who is coming and delivering food at your office or at your work. He can actually get work done while in his car. He can say, hey, where is my next pickup? Where is my next drop off? Is there a door code to get into this building? So voice actually becomes a essential part of their work life. They consider voice as a wingman or as a dispatcher whom they can talk to all day long to get work done. So I think it can be pretty powerful.
Where do you see us right now in the spectrum of where we could be? Are we 20% in? Are we 80% in? If this were a timeline, if you think of like the web timeline or mobile timeline, are we like 1997 of web, 2008 of mobile? Like how deep into the voice evolution are we right now?
Yeah, I think one way to think about it is like if you look at self-driving cars and Tesla, for example, right? There's a level 1 through 5. Basically, I think right now, currently Tesla is around level 2, 1 to 2. Eventually, level 1 to 2 is that it will do some of the steering for you, some of the braking for you, but you're still in the driver's seat. There's a steering wheel and all that. But level 5, is there is no steering wheel. It either takes you to point B or it doesn't, right? Like there is no you take over kind of thing. So, and I think we're probably, they're saying the next 3 to 4 years we're going to be there, right? In terms of, I think the business apps, we're way below level 1.
So like 0.1?
0.1, I think
0.1.
so.
Okay.
But I think, all these sort of the backend systems have to get a lot smarter than just API level, calls and stuff. They need to be able to do multiple tasks so that we can naturally say, hey, get me this report from this folder and send it to Mike in marketing or something like
So probably a good time to be learning about this stuff. We're early on in the curve,
Exactly.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
awesome.
Actually, so I want to double down on that.
Sure.
It's not just, I think this is a really good opportunity for the enterprise apps. There aren't many enterprise apps, but we're expecting 50% of the US households to have a smart speaker in, I think, 2 years, right? With those kinds of statistics and the fact that everyone has a smart speaker, smart enabled phone today, like there's a lot of people are going to be very, very, very familiar with this technology. We do have a certain amount of progress to make in terms of the actual speech recognition and actually how do you build the best apps on it. But I'm going to say the announcements that came in the last year in itself have just enabled a whole floodgate of enterprise apps. I'm expecting to hear a lot of announcements in this space, and I believe a lot more people should be building it right now.
What do you think the organizations within the enterprise that will be affected first or most will be? And Rachel, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think that we already see it. So again, I agree that we're not nearly in the 1% of where voice is going to be. I was just asked earlier, where do I think we're going to get? And if you guys have watched the movie Her, this is actually where I think we're going to get. I don't know if it's going to be as fast as we all hope for it, but I think we're just going to talk to everything. I think the place where it affects the most in the enterprise, so obviously that's on the customer success or the customer support or service, because we are used to that actually from other solutions that were in the past, like the IVR system, so the virtual phone assistant that we all grow to hate, right? Because it's not really working. And I think this is also where our fear from the coming solutions is coming from. So I think that customer service and customer support is the first place we'll see it. We're moving towards into seeing it coming more on the general self-service side, and eventually also on the sales and the marketing side. So those are the two areas where I think most of the companies are not pushing towards to. One of the things that I also think that enterprise and we as customers need to understand when we're talking to devices, it's replacing something that we learned to do very fast. So we used to talk to people to get that report, right? So get me that report very fast. So there was a person who would get it to me. And then we got it very fast using the web because we just had to click here, 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 and we got it. And then it was in our pocket because it was on our phone. And now we have to reconvince ourselves that talking to something will bring it even faster to us. So we're actually using the most natural way for us to communicate, which is voice. We just don't have to rely on people on the other side, which is great, right? So we get the best of both worlds. So I think once we'll be able to crack that down and to make sure that we're really getting what we want and it's very intuitive, I think it's going to be all over in the enterprise, at home, whatever department that's going to need it. Whenever there's a place to automate, it will be automated.
Do you think on that, expanding on that, do you think
Hey, Steve, you mind if I jump in on that one for a second?
Yeah, please do.
So I've got a very different perspective here. I build teams from people that are freelancers, people that are willing to take risks, people who are itching to get into a new direction or looking to take advantage of some opportunity. So from my point of view, I mean, everything that everybody here is saying is absolutely correct. But I think about how it is that we're able to, these teams that are cobbled together that exist all around the country, what makes us able to do what we do. And it's because we can take somebody's work and easily integrate it into an idea that we have, right? So if you all code in Python, you can import things, you can write your own packages, you can easily bring it in to create your own application. And so when we can start pulling in the assistant that is really good at this particular task, recording conversational notes, pull in the assistant that's able to answer questions about roadside assistance, or pull in the person that's able to answer questions about Salesforce type stuff. Then all of a sudden you can take those types of answers and start stitching them together into a unique application that isn't necessarily the new Skynet or the next AI, but it is a representation of everybody's contribution across dozens of different people taking advantage of a certain market segment. That's what I think about as a maturity of the technology.
Do you think that lines up, and this is kind of playing on your comment, Sean, and also yours, Rachel, do you think consumer expectations and technology capabilities are to the point where, you hear a lot of people say when Siri came out, the expectation was set that this was going to be the be-all, end-all digital
The
assistant.
expectations are unreasonable right now. You spend most of your time just saying like, oh, okay, well, that's a good idea. So you start breaking it down.
How do you bridge that? So that's a good point. I
Yeah,
think,
so
Omar, you got a thought on it.
I think the most important thing when you're designing the product is really, I call it a social design problem. Like, we run into that all the time. When we first started, we started like Alexa with commands. And people thought that was super cool, but they weren't going to use it in a 10-person meeting, right? They weren't going to interrupt a meeting and say a command. So we completely flipped the model to be, we are just going to listen and react passively, put it on the screen on your mobile phone, and give you what you want without interrupting. And that made usage spike up. I mean, I think now we're hitting the point where we'll probably hit 10,000 companies having people using this kind of thing, whereas when we did it the other way, it was slower. And so I think it's actually, the onus is on us. The problem with Siri is they hired all these actors to get up on stage and make it sound like Siri is going to cook your meal and solve your personal problems at home. It was ridiculous. And Alexa was like, look, I'm just going to turn on the lights. I'm going to play a song, a very specific action. So that expectation setting is our problem. And you really have to bring users down to a very specific, hey, I'm going to do this thing, and I'm going to do it well, and I'm going to make it easy, and I'm going to fit into your workflow. If you can't do that, you're going to struggle with adoption.
So I would, on that, having a conversation earlier today about the importance of understanding who the user is in the context. So I would imagine in the enterprise, if you're building a skill like you were talking about, where the user is going to be an employee or somebody that is familiar with the nomenclature that needs to be used, how you would go at that is very different than if you've got a consumer-facing skill for support. What are your thoughts on where enterprises start with this? Do they start like, let's make a customer-facing, public-facing voice?
You start wherever a mistake isn't going to have a big impact.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You start wherever a mistake isn't going to have a big impact.
Okay, yeah.
And then you start learning from there and expanding to where your risk is more manageable, and there's always this data issue.
So
right?
no
Everybody
go
thinks they have
fast
it
and break
figured out.
stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, I think for enterprise, one of the key decision they have to make is, okay, what is my cost on investment on this thing? I don't think enterprise is going to invest a lot of millions of dollars just because voice is sexy and they see an ad on the TV that hey, voice can turn on my lights. They want to see that, hey, if I have a distributed workforce which is on the go all day long, what tools can I provide them so they are safe on the road and they can get their job done much faster than they can do today. So what that means is replacing the dispatchers they have in the back office today who possibly cannot handle the amount of the workforce growth that is happening. So think of like, Uber Eats delivering food at your door, or think of Postmates, doing delivery. These people are talking to dispatchers in the back office to get information about, hey, where do I have to make a drop? Where do I have to pick up? And if there's any special instruction. Now, if you replace that experience with something in the car on their phone, they can talk to all day long. They can also ask other questions. They can also ask, hey, how much money did I make today? If you're an Uber driver and you want to know how you are doing on your day, you can ask those questions. You can also ask, hey, which area I should be where the most drive requests are. So they can also ask more analytics question. The point is, these guys are living in their car all day long. So they actually want something, that will help them. And plus to the enterprise, it actually saves them money. Similarly, I think, Rachel was talking about customer service. I think there also, if you can replace some of the agents with the voice virtual agent, that's a real saving and it's a better experience for the consumers as well because now they have somebody to talk to 24/7.
Let me ask a question to the audience real quick. So why are you here? Like, what's the use case that you're imagining is the reason for considering voice in your organization? Anybody feeling like they are ready to share at 4:30 this afternoon? What's the, and this can be anybody, but what's the kind of the low-hanging fruit for an organization that's looking at voice as being part of the mix? Can anybody think of like, when you think at home, I imagine my, typical use case, I play music, I, add stuff to my calendar, add stuff to the to-do list. What are those kinds of applications that you can imagine in your organizations? Anybody want to share that? Yeah, right. So I think the buzz term now is robotic process automation, right? Is that the? Yeah. What else? Right behind you. So I hear both of you kind of saying the same thing, like internal applications that can save us from doing work that we've got to spend our own time on, right? What are your thoughts on this? Anyway?
I look at those and I see like two examples we see in our real customers. So one of them is you go to a sales manager and they're like, it's the beginning of the week, it's a Monday morning meeting. Nobody's updated Salesforce. Maybe half the people have updated it and that's what I use. So we'll go to someone like that and say, great, just have Eva read their calendar, show up to the meetings, and it'll automatically log into Salesforce and update that opportunity with the action items coming out of the meeting. They don't have to do anything, right? That kind of thing that takes off load and does something super simple but repeatable and gives the manager data and takes off pressure from them from being running from that meeting to the next meeting, they haven't remembered the notes.
Yeah.
So that would be one. And then the flip one that's internal is we see people who have staff meetings, and they just come out of their staff meeting, they get an email from Eva saying, here are the 4 action items and decisions you take, send it, and it sends out to you, and it could send out to everybody who went to the meeting, and you don't have to do anything. So I think you're right that a lot of us, when we start, we think of these things that'll like respond, but what you find in the real world is if you can not have to change their workflow and rather fit into it and take one task off their back, they love you for it.
On the sales side, Vineet, you can probably speak to this. What are some of the things that Salesforce is maybe considering, if you can share, for how you can't share? Or they're not considering anything?
I cannot speak anything to our product plans.
Okay. In your opinion, how can this help sales organizations internally?
So I look at this in 2 different ways, right? There's the internal and there's the customer facing. There's a lot of opportunities internal. Like my own life, I can think about like a bunch of small little things where it can make my life easier. And the example that Omar was giving is of that type. And there's a lot of those things. They don't necessarily have to be all like, listen to the whole meeting. It could be just me giving a command to update the status of a particular task. Customer facing is trickier, in my opinion, and this is just personal opinions, right? If you're having a customer call your call center and the system does not perform well or it's having a lot of errors, that's going to hurt your reputation. However, as I think Gaurav was mentioning, like I'd love to have a better relationship with most of the companies that I'm using. Like I've got an Apple phone. Like I'd love it when I got home that I could ask Alexa as to when is the next Apple phone coming out. Like some basic questions, but sort of building my relationship with Apple and with all the brands. Like I have a Honda, right? Asking questions about when is the warranty expiring and stuff like that, so that I don't actually have to walk to the car.
So would it be maybe a voice FAQ? Is it, or is it deeper than that?
A little deeper than that. It's not just FAQ. This is my opinion. It is also specific information that's personalized to me. Like my warranty on my car will expire at a very specific time. I did know it when I bought my car, right? Yeah. And most of these things are common questions that I imagine 90% of the people would want at some point in the next year, right? So
I think there is a very interesting thing here, because I think that if we would have had this session like a year or 2 years ago, and at least from my experience talking with clients, the first question was like, yeah, voice is great or chat is great, but we don't find the use case, right? And we have it the opposite way today. We have thousands of use cases. It's just a case, where do I start, right? Do I start on the enterprise side? Do I start on the customer side? Do I start it on the HR, or do I start it on the getting the general information? And I think that there's no wrong. So I agree with you when you say, I want it to be actionable. I want it to do something for me, because if I want the information, I have it. But we work with financial institutions, and you wouldn't believe what is the first or the most asked questions when people are calling the bank. Would you imagine? Can you just think
hours?
of what is?
What are your hours?
No. What's my balance? Can you think of all the ways that you can actually figure out your balance before you make a call to the bank to ask for your balance? And still, this is the most common question. So maybe FAQ sounds stupid to us because, come on, you can go on the website, you can take a look, right? But people are still using it. And FAQ is actually not a bad thing, because it gives you, I think it also builds the trust. So you get the general questions answered to you, but then you can also use it, for more actionable or task that you need to do. So I think it's actually very fascinating to see that everything is possible to do over voice. And looking at all of you, I guess some of you have kids. I know I have. And the way that they interact with those machines, I mean, come on, this is crazy. They don't have lower expectation. They ask Alexa everything. Alexa is the authority at home. If she would say it's night, right? So, and they feel as if it's there for them. They can ask her to help in math. They would ask her if she has a boyfriend. They ask her if she wants to go out with us when we go out for dinner. So and this is just the Alexa, but we're gonna have an Alexa in our car, like a metaphoric Alexa in our car, at our home, in our office, everywhere with us. So it's just going to have to serve us on all those scenarios, right? So I think that right now it is an issue that they're all very siloed, right? So I need the bank, so I go to the Alexa app, right, for the bank, and then I want to know about when is my insurance is, expired, so I need to go there. But once that thing will know everything for us, we can all just go to the beach and relax, and that's, I think, what we're all expecting to do very soon.
Yeah,
Universal basic artificial intelligence.
Yeah, the end of scarcity. The machines will do all of our work.
There is
I'm
a
on board.
slight difference. So, like, these are all consumer-facing discussions, right? And I'm dealing with internal stuff where you can go and train somebody how to properly use it, right? So you can, now all of a sudden you get into a different context where you're like, okay, if you want to pull up this sales information while you're entering into this particular customer who you might say, like, you can't remember when you saw them last, so you're like, okay, Spring, when was the last time I came to this location or to this vendor, right? And it uses the GPS, so you don't have to remember their name and get it exactly right. And they say, you were here 4 months ago, and then, okay, who is the manager here now? And that person might have gotten overturned. So it's using a bit of context. And what the client really wants is for them to be able to be in the room doing the sale and say, what are projections for these items in the next 6 months, right? And then it pulls up the charts that we designed, and it shows that if they use our system, that they'll make an extra 10%, which makes the sale much easier. And trying to piece together that context and then train them to do a simple question in each one of those contexts, so that way they can have a smooth sales process throughout the day. We get to train them a little bit, but still there's a limitation to that training. And so where do you train and where do you optimize the context, and you kind of go back and forth with that.
So that brings up a question that comes up a lot. Should we be trying to build assistants that are more human, or should we be building assistants that humans need to learn how to use?
Oh, there's no doubt about that. You definitely do not want to have a high bar for learning. You want them to adopt it. So I think you have to, I don't think you have a choice, because also Alexa set a certain bar on an expectation that you have to allow the machine to understand intent. So for instance, when we first rolled out, we had a command structure where you'd say, okay, Eva, the action item here is something. And a user would come in and say, okay, Eva, action time.
Yeah.
and so when we first saw that, we're like, oh, yep. So then we had to build in a lot more basic intent understanding, and we didn't have a choice.
So the
Engineers
assistants,
were like, oh, just train them better. I'm like, sorry, no,
the
you can't do
assistants
that.
need to be more human. So does it need to get to the point where, I'm sure probably everybody, the fact that you're here, you seem like the Google Duplex demo. Is that where it needs to get to? And if so, how soon?
I think the answer is actually both. Like, it depends on whether the user is a beginner user or an advanced user. And for most actually applications, it is really, really, really important to design for the beginner user so that they start using it. But what happens with voice compared to your average interface is that voice is temporal, And if you have a very long, elaborate description and explanation for every single thing, every time you say it, after the 5th time, the user is going to get bored and is going to just tune out, right? So there's a whole bunch of natural expectations that we need to support, and part of that means supporting the beginner user and making it very easy. But part of it does involve having an advanced way where the person can just, given short commands, can get a lot done fast.
I would say, I think you mentioned a very good point that the voice in enterprise have to solve a real problem. It is not just, hey, okay, what's the temperature outside? Is it going to rain today? Is it like, what can it do for me? And when it comes to that, I don't think we can expect the enterprise employees to change their habits or change their workflow, how they have been doing their job for all these years. It has to be the other way around, where we actually design a system. So I'll give an example, if somebody comes to set up a TV at your house, and they have to figure out a number of things. Hey, how many TV do you want in your house? You have a 2-story house, you want 5 TVs, pretty much people have TV in every room these days. and then they ask you like, okay, what kind of DVRs do you want? So if we actually build a system for them, and the technician at some point, he can gather all this information using voice, but then there comes a point where they have to actually do some diagnostic things on those machines. They have to say, okay, now can you configure this DVR? And today what they do, they actually call the back office. They read actually the serial number, and then it's a 10-minute process, and the back office then goes off and does something. Voice can be very, very helpful because now it's contextual. It knows where this technician is. It knows the address of that house. It knows the serial number of the product that has been sent to this house. And all the technician have to say is that configure this DVR, and it will do it for him. So now actually it is really being helpful, not just, answering questions. So I think in that scenario,
So like a real assistant.
yeah, it's a real assistant plus, they
Yeah.
are doing the job they have been doing, but instead of talking to a dispatcher, they can talk to the voice on their phone.
Let me ask a question, try to bring it down. How many of you in here work in IT, in IS or IT in some capacity? And what about sales and marketing? And what about finance, accounting, finance? Anybody? Corporate management strategy? Corporate management strategy? Anything I've left out? HR? Design? Systems design? User experience design? Okay. Yeah, so I'd say product. Yeah, product. Okay.
That's fascinating.
It's,
People who specialize not just in design, but user interface design, that's really cool.
I think that's especially with voice. Would you agree? Like the challenge of user experience design, it's come up without us talking about it multiple times. You can't just say the same thing over and over. What do we need to be doing as product people internally or externally to ramp up our skill set to take this on?
Well, I think the one thing that we haven't mentioned in that there is what changes in the enterprise versus the consumer interaction. So the enterprise, first of all, there's a different security model, right? So Alexa, Cortana, Google, the data that goes in belongs to the corporation across the user base. Some enterprise applications don't want that. They're going to want to basically know that, no, this data is owned by me, and it's not going to be accessible except in certain uses. So that's a different security model is one. The second one is some expectation. So if you look at the uses of like Siri and Google were about information queries, where Alexa was a little bit about action, turn on light, play music. In the enterprise, there's a third modality, which is conversations, which is you're not necessarily talking back and forth to it. It's in the stream of somebody else's conversations, taking an action. And then there's a workflow pack that you don't have really at home. So you have to rethink your design problems, not by copying what's going on by Alexa. It's, as you were talking about these in-context examples, it's a different problem you have to design for.
Yeah, I mean, just 10 years ago when iPhone came out, right, people had to, initially what they were doing is just putting websites on a phone, really not thinking about the touch, right? And the companies that made it big, like Angry Birds and all that, is that they figured out how to use the touch as a major part of their experience and stuff. So I think we're going to have the same thing. Once we start doing voice apps, you have to design it differently. Even the APIs change on the back end. You have to multitask. You have to simplify things.
The detail's important too, right?
It is.
Like I know, like in a mobile app, just the touch and the gestures, and and in a voice app, making it feel not like a phone tree is
Exactly.
not as simple. And this is all design, user experience.
Yeah, I think I would add to that. The biggest power of voice, I feel, is it removes the barrier of the technology. It really democratizes the technology for all of us. The downside is, or I would say the challenge is, that we all speak differently. We all actually have been designed to touch the same way, or type the same way, or tap here or tap there. But when it comes to speaking, no matter how much training we get, we still all speak differently. So I think the challenge which the designers for the voice have, this is the hardest challenge in the voice adoption is going to be, that how can you design for the masses?
Yeah.
Because people will say things differently. Even the two same employees with the same background, they will say things differently as well. So design actually is going to be a make or break in the voice adoption.
Yeah, so I think I just wanted to talk about that, and also the question that you raised earlier: should it be more human, or should it, should we adjust to it? So I think there are a couple of layers here. So being more human in terms of understanding us better and understanding different people better, but also in terms of how do we present at the end it's a bot, right? It talks or it's chatting, but it's a bot. So how do we present it to the outside? And we worked with a very large client, and it was fascinating to see when the voice-enabled solution was identifying as, "Hi, I am your virtual assistant," the conversation was more around commands. Give me this, ask this, I need that. When it didn't identify itself, we got the whole story of that person. Look, my wife forgot to do this, and now I'm approaching you, but it wasn't my fault because she forgot to do it, and the system had to figure that out. So actually, I think that by presenting that this is a virtual assistant, it helps us as platforms also to learn what's the answer. It also put the focus on the other side. So the other side understand it's not a real person. I think expectations today are lower. So people say, okay, I have to be very clear what I'm saying. It also, they are also more forgiving now. So at the beginning, people were saying, oh, that's stupid, right? That's so stupid. But now people understand that those solutions are actually there to help them. So they're not trying to tackle them, but they're trying to, leverage what they have to offer. So I think it's very interesting to see also in terms of how do you design the voice and how does the voice react to it. And I know a lot of people are also talking about people losing their jobs because those things are taking their jobs, but I think we see a lot of new jobs here. So voice design, the capability of building voice personas, which is so important if you really want, it's kind of understanding the touch with mobile, right? Yeah. If you don't have a persona to that thing that is related to what you're building, people are not going to feel comfortable to use it and ask it different questions more than just the FAQs. So I think that we can make it human, but we need to make sure that we're not mixing it up and we're not trying to lie to anyone, saying I'm a real person on the other side.
Would there be a context where, as humans, we would prefer to know that it's a bot because in human dialogue, there's a lot of nuance, like you need to consider the other person's feelings and you don't want to sound maybe too aggressive or, but in a lot of use cases, you just want to get done whatever it is that you get done, and being able to be direct with a bot and not have to worry about hurting its feelings, right?
Yeah, and I think it goes back to our experience of doing things fast, right? If you want to do things fast, in most cases you're not going to be very nice while doing it, right? Because you're used to clicking on thing, and you're not clicking on your website and saying, oh, thank you, right? You just do it. So yeah, definitely, this is something that is changing. I still make sure that when when my daughters are asking something for Alexa to do, they say thanks at the end because it's transforming. They will go to their friends and they will command them, right? They're not going to ask for something and be nice. So this is something that it's important also for us to teach our kids and also to act the same way.
And the bots won't need therapy in the event that doesn't happen.
We hope so. We don't know.
We don't know.
That's a whole new job, right?
That's a whole
bot
different
therapist.
panel.
I mean,
I
that
think
speed thing is, I think it translates more specifically to how well thought out or how precise is the decision tree that any organization has to go through. Yeah. Right, that's when you said speed, that's the first thing I think about is, do they have so many different actions that potentially need to be taken that you need to have a conversation with the thing, and then it asks a question, and then you go, no, I told you that before, and that's where the empathy part comes in, and maybe they should be a little bit more human, so that way they can say, oh, I'm sorry, I thought you meant this, okay, I'll focus on this. Maybe that's more human, but if it's a limited set of options, it should just know what to do, and there shouldn't be a question because you can give a
really
very precise command.
Really the use case.
Right.
You got a question? Yeah.
They give you a number 25 on 16, so I got to do job X. Right. What are you talking about? Oh, give me the blue 18 millimeter. I shouldn't have to do that. Yeah. In an enterprise. For the consumer, yes. Yeah. But again, it goes back to that workflow. What can I do to make that more efficient?
Well, but even in enterprise, just imagine, I don't know what you do, but imagine suddenly there's some new opportunity, there's new people, there was a merger, there's a new division came in, there's a new line of business, there's something that has changed, and what you thought was a precise command is now suddenly a conversation.
No, I think it's a very good point you just raised, because I will just double down on that. I think the domain, understanding of the domain model.
Let me
is
grab
very
this one other question, not to interrupt, but I know you've been waiting. To expand on that, I want to open it up, but there's also, like the authentication question, you've got a different use case context. So can I authenticate with my voice if there are other people around? Like that, and now do we need to start moving into multimodal type experiences where if I do need to access information through voice that is sensitive or private, do I need some other way to verify that? And what are your thoughts on where?
Yeah, that's one of the key
voice-
consideration we had in our product. That we give the both voice and visual experience. So the user at any point can go back to his mobile device and he can continue there. Also, I think the point I will make is I think understanding the word spoken at every enterprise is very critical. That's the only way the system actually can work. So going back to my previous example, of somebody coming to my home, setting up DVR. If we say, well, okay, this house has, it needs 2 Whopper and 1 Joey. Now, Hopper and Joey, these are the words of Dish Network DVR. Outside in a consumer word, they could mean nothing. So I think understanding that word is critical. And the second part I think is also the branding experience for every company. I think they want to have some control over that. If you're talking to Disney, you want to sound differently than if you're talking to American Airlines. And I think that differentiation today does not exist in the world of assistants that are out there. So I believe that, as Omar mentioned about owning the data is critical, but owning the branding is also critical.
Yeah, so that leads me into another question that I had. In the enterprise, who should they choose? We've got Amazon, we've got Google, we've got Cortana, we've got Snips, and like there's open source ones. Do we want to own the language models? Do we want to own the voice? I mean, what's the answer?
So first of all, largely the enterprise applications aren't Google and Alexa and stuff like that. So for instance, when we sell in the enterprise, we're not being compared to them at all.
For
we're
internal
not
enterprise
selling-
applications,
Yeah,
but
because
what
we're
about
selling
customer facing?
We're selling something specific, customer facing. There's a whole bunch of startups. Now, how would a startup succeed in a world where you have an Amazon and Google and so on? Our thesis is user adaptation becomes super important. You have to adapt to the user's vocabulary within the enterprise. You have to conform to their security models, to their workflow, to their accents, and that's an area of an opportunity where something like Google, Microsoft, Alexa will compete at the base API level, but user adaptation is where you get a huge jump in accuracy and specificity. And you look at those security questions, they're really big. I mean, you talk about, we just went through GDPR readiness, and in healthcare you have even more stringent requirements. I think there's plenty of opportunities for new companies to come in either on their own stack or built, even using some of the stacks from Google and those guys, and it's in user adaptation and security where you will have a place and a defensibility. It's a little bit different than competing. So the quick answer is those companies aren't really doing huge enterprise applications yet at all.
Yeah, I would add to that because that kind of plays to the space we are in. I think if you look at the kind of enterprises use cases Alexa or Google are targeting, or I would say Alexa is probably more aggressive than other companies right now. For a good reason. I think they're doing pretty well. They are targeting the use cases like, hey, if I can put an Alexa device outside the conference room and I can, book a conference room using that, that's great. or I can put a device inside the room and I can start my meeting, asking Alexa. So those are the good use cases, but I don't think they are ready for like the kind of use cases, we just talked about. Like if somebody is driving all day long and he needs an assistant to get his job done all day long, Alexa is not actually really catering to that market today. And I'm thinking they have plenty on their hands right now as it is. So
it's coming out in 2019 in the first Lexus. So it's not so far away, I think. Yeah.
Right. But I think, anybody who has to address that scenario, they have to really think about, a couple of areas. We talked about branding, I think security, building the right experience, understanding the workflow of the company. That is something, how the job gets done. And it's going to be actually a multi-turn dialogue, because not really usually single response.
So will we have a variety of assistants that we work with as humans throughout the day? Like maybe today when we work on our mobile devices, we've got apps that we use for personal reasons. Yeah. We've got apps that we use for business reasons. Would that be kind of analogous to how it might play out with bots and assistants?
I think so. I think, this is how the mobile economy actually got developed, that there is a branded experience, for every company. So I think it's not very far-fetched idea to think about that. People could,
But it's not
enterprise.
because, I just have to say, but we have a different experience and branding, but it's not because every company went and built its own phone. So there is a difference between what Alexa and Google are enabling and what, maybe like what Omar is enabling with his company. So obviously there's a differentiation if we're talking about enterprise solutions and what enterprise consumer facing, because on the consumer facing side, you can go and get your own devices and your own, brands and whatever you want. It's going to be Alexa that people will have at home. So you can't fight it. In terms of, choosing one or the other, we're a build once, deploy anywhere. So, obviously I think they should focus on the business logic and then use a platform that can help them deploy it across multiple channels. Now, in terms of whether, Alexa will be in our car or not be in our car, and if, I don't think Amazon is going to be able to create the branding and the experience that each company wants. Going back to mobile, Apple was not trying to build the Pepsi app or the next Yelp, right? They were providing the infrastructure for that. And there were other companies who took advantage of it to create a business. It's the same with Amazon, and it's the same with Google, and it's probably the same with Cortana and whatever is going to come up out there. So you're going to have another layer. So you have the infrastructure layer, then you have the development layer. And you could do it by building it from scratch. You can use a platform. You can use something else. But you are going to be available on those solutions. For the enterprise itself, there is now the Amazon for Business. And I can tell you that we have a couple of clients who are looking into it. And they're not small. And they're willing to get Alexa into their offices for some of the use cases that they would want to leverage. I do definitely see the advantage of having something that sits on your, own personal, data servers or whatever it is. But I don't think that people will be worrying too much to provide that data also elsewhere. So it is complex, right? Because so on the consumer-facing side, I think that they will just have to be everywhere because this is where their clients is. It's like saying, will I have a mobile app for Apple or for Android, right? You wouldn't ask that today. On the enterprise side, again, it's a little more complex. I think that security issues, I don't think that's an issue. I think that's solvable. I think data is a big thing. We talk a lot with retail companies. No one wants to go on Amazon. They're all looking for a Google Home solution. And Google, and excuse me if there are any Google people, are not clever enough to take advantage of it and to actually approach commerce company and tell them, look, we don't take your data because we don't care what you guys are selling, right? Because we gain money from something else. But at the end, it's they will have to work multi-channel and they will have to find their own solution also internally. And in terms again of mobile, we had the phase of bring your own device. Mm-hmm. We ended up all using the same device with some crappy thing that is reading your emails and making it really slow. And we're probably going to have the same as we move forward on voice.
We've got just about 5 minutes. I want to make sure that if there is a question in your head that we didn't answer, that we get that out there. So
you guys are all experts, right? So from a B2B context, what are some of the coolest use cases you've seen? Right?
That's a great question.
So like as a consumer, in a consumer context, when I got Alexa, I was like, set timer for 15 minutes. And that was the coolest thing. now my daughters know when they have to get off the school to go to school, or play Jeopardy, or something like that. So but from a B2B context, and I think the gentleman on the left was talking about you're a salesperson, you're heading into somewhere, you want to, who did I talk to?
I actually really appreciate that you just asked this question because I wanted to build on what you said, and then he asked the question. I went, I missed my chance.
Got to talk faster, Sean.
Yeah, try not to be rude.
Your NLU is not working.
The B2B thing, there is an existing part that's emerging right now, right? So we talk a lot about these kind of large organizations building the massive solution, and the Google maybe is just not, I think the phrase you used was not creative enough, right, to do blah. One of the neat things that Google has done is launch TensorFlow in the browser. And that is allowing you to now train voice in the browser. So just if whoever codes here, right? So you do a mouse over, you're coding in JavaScript, you do a mouse over type thing, and that's then puts the JavaScript in a certain state, which allows you to do different type of action. Now you can have, the voices enabled, and so it's supposed to be listening for something, and that then gets to the VUI guy in the purple or blue shirt back there on his phone. We could say anything right now. He doesn't know we're talking about him. There becomes this ecosystem of people going to hackathons, people who have ideas, and suddenly they realize that they can do it, right? And so and this is what I do, is I cobble together these teams, and so there's people all over the country that see opportunities in different places, and they are building MVPs and the next level capability because somebody like Google had the foresight to make it democratize, basically, the technology.
I've got one example that I can share also. Like, we worked on a project, or I was involved in a project where it was effectively a voice version of a business dashboard, and when we were first looking at it, it's like, this will just be kind of cool because you can hear the metrics, rather than just look at them. But what was really cool about it is the opportunity to explain what those metrics meant. And that's what's very hard to do visually. So like if you log into Google Analytics, for anybody, I don't know enough about it, but what I do know is when I log into it, it's really confusing. To have voice as a part of the mix, to say, like in one example, you could say, how are we doing in finance? And the bot might say, we're doing great, but our aging is increasing by 1% over the last 3 months. And if this continues, we're going to be short on cash at this point in the future, which is going to have this effect on our bottom line. And in most organizations, you need somebody that really understands the data to provide that kind of context, not just a dashboard. And to me, that was more specific. Do you guys have any very specific examples to answer that question? We got just about 0 minutes to finish it.
Candidate interviews we've seen used where you're interviewing somebody and there's 4 or 5 people interviewing them, and you come out of it and someone's like, yeah, they're a hire. Like, did you hear how they answered this question? And what happens is just that snippet has been transcribed, sent to them, they hear it, and it just really reduces the time you need to understand what happened in the interview.
I've seen some really interesting use cases when they're all mobile first, voice-enabled solutions that require actually more than one device. So imagine being in a meeting room, for example, and saying, show me the XYZ dashboard, for example. And there's some really good effects you can do, keep the privacy issues, resolve the privacy issues, as well as still provide support for a very broad set of tasks that I think voice does really well with. The other really cool use case, in my opinion, is the Google Duplex use case. So excited to see how these sort of evolve in the next few years.
And we're right up at 5 o'clock, which is our time, but I don't believe there's another group coming in after this, but I want to be respectful. If you do have questions, I'm certainly willing to stay if you guys are also. But if you need to move on to the next thing, I certainly understand that as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.